Picture this. You're a Roman citizen, standing in a bustling square in the year AD 67. A chilling rumor is spreading through the crowd like wildfire. The Emperor Nero, the man who rules the known world, has just gotten married. But the shock isn't who the bride is. It's that the bride isn't a woman. He's a young man, a former slave named Sporus. But that isn't even the most chilling part of the story. Nero didn't just marry a man. He tried to turn him into a woman. Because the thing that made the entire Roman Empire shudder wasn't about gender. It was about what absolute power can do to the human soul, how it can twist and break and remake a person in the most haunting way imaginable. And to understand this tragedy, we have to go back in time to the man who started it all, the most notoriously unhinged emperor in Roman history. In this video, you are about to witness the terrifying transformation of an emperor from a golden ruler into a deranged tyrant. You'll uncover the mystery behind the horrifying feminization techniques of ancient medicine. You'll follow the silent struggle of Sporus, a young man fighting to hold on to the last pieces of his own humanity. And you'll understand why this isn't just some bizarre historical footnote. It's a timeless warning about the destructive nature of unchecked power. When Nero took the throne at just 16 years old, Rome breathed a sigh of relief. He was smart, he loved the arts, and he was guided by the brilliant philosopher Seneca. In his first years, he lowered taxes, funded public works, and was loved by the people. This was a Nero full of potential. He wasn't born evil. You have to ask yourself, how does someone with a start like that become a monster? The answer is power. Absolute intoxicating power. It isolates you. It feeds your paranoia. The whispers in the palace corridors, the constant threat of assassination plots, they began to warp him. The breaking point was the Pisonian conspiracy in AD 65, a massive plot to kill him, involving senators, guards, and even old friends. After that, Nero trusted no one. He executed his old mentor, Seneca. He forced his friends to take their own lives. He even had his own mother, Agrippina, murdered. The darkness wasn't just creeping in anymore. It had taken over. But it was in the shadow of this growing madness that a figure appeared. Not to save him, but to unknowingly push Nero over the edge into his most depraved obsession. Her name was Poppaea Sabina, and she wasn't just beautiful. She was brilliant, ambitious, and utterly ruthless. She saw the deeply insecure boy hiding inside the all-powerful emperor, and she knew exactly how to play him. This was a two-way street. Poppaea skillfully manipulated Nero's obsession to gain power, but she would soon become a victim of that very obsession. She convinced Nero to cast aside his first wife, Octavia, and make her empress. But Nero's love was a cage. He saw her as a perfect work of art to be possessed, isolating her from the world. She wasn't afraid to challenge him, to argue with him, and this defiance only made him more infatuated, more unhinged. And yet, the climax of this twisted love story wasn't a tender moment. It was an explosion of violence that doomed them both. In a fit of rage, while she was pregnant with his child, Nero kicked Poppaea. The blow killed her. The loss shattered him. But Nero's mind couldn't accept the reality of what he'd done, so it created a new one. He refused to have her cremated like a normal Roman. Instead, he had her body embalmed with exotic spices, laid out for public display, and he gave a eulogy praising her as a divine being. He was trying to keep her with him, a beautiful silent statue. His madness had reached its peak. And then, out of that grief and delusion, he saw a flicker of hope, a twisted, distorted hope, found in the most unlikely of forms. One day, Nero saw him, a young boy, a freed slave named Sporus, who was around 14 or 15 years old, and he looked with an almost supernatural resemblance, just like his dead wife, Poppaea. Nero didn't want a replacement for Poppaea. He wanted to bring her back. He looked at Sporus not as a person, but as a vessel, a blank canvas on which he could paint the memory of his lost love. Imagine the sheer terror for Sporus. One moment, you're an insignificant boy in the background of the imperial court. Next, the most powerful and unstable man in the world has his eyes on you. Nero's first order was for his physicians to perform a castration on the boy. This wasn't a common procedure in Rome. It was seen as something foreign, barbaric. In an age without anesthesia, surgery was excruciatingly painful, and the risk of infection and death was incredibly high. But this wasn't just about controlling Sporus. It was about erasing his masculinity, his identity, in a society that valued manhood, what they called virilitas above all else. But the surgical knife was only the beginning of the horror. The real torture was psychological. It was the slow, methodical process of erasing a human being and forcing him to become a ghost. Nero held a lavish public wedding ceremony. He made Sporus dress in the fine silks of an empress, and he gave him a new name, Sabina, Poppaea's name. Sporus was then forced to learn. He had to learn how to walk like Poppaea, talk like her, use her gestures, and wear her makeup. He was even forced to learn her memories, to respond to stories and inside jokes that weren't his. Imagine looking in a mirror and seeing a stranger staring back at you, a body that's been mutilated, a face painted to look like someone else, a mind filled with borrowed memories. Where in all of that is you? Even the most hardened Roman aristocrats were aghast. The whispers were everywhere, but no one dared to speak out. Fear had crushed disgust. They saw Sporus not as a boy, but as a living, breathing testament to the emperor's absolute, terrifying power. Day in and day out, Sporus played his part. Nero paraded him around the empire, treating him as his beloved queen, and Sporus became a masterful actor. He learned to smile at the right times, to nod gracefully, to be the perfect, silent companion. He did it to survive, but it was a life of profound loneliness. Surrounded by the splendor of the court, he was utterly alone. He was no longer Sporus, but he could never truly be Poppaea. He was a phantom, trapped between two identities. But madness never lasts. The wheels of history were turning, and Sporus's fate was about to be thrown into a political game more brutal than he could ever imagine. Nero took Sporus on a grand tour of Greece, where the emperor competed in artistic festivals as a singer and a poet. Sporus was there, by his side, the beautiful, silent empress. But the Greeks, who revered the ideal of the male form, looked on with a mixture of morbid curiosity and quiet contempt. The historians of the time, Suetonius and Cassius Dio, recorded the details with shock, viewing it as the ultimate symbol of moral decay. Sporus had become a living symbol of Nero's power, a power so immense it could literally reshape a human being. But even a god emperor has his limits, and Nero's empire was beginning to crumble. When an empire falls, the emperor falls with it. But tragically, the fate of Sporus did not end with his tormentor. It was simply passed from one tyrant's hands to another's. Rebellions flared up across the empire. Generals marched on Rome. The Senate, finally finding its courage, declared Nero an enemy of the state. Abandoned by everyone, the once mighty emperor fled, and in a final act of cowardice, took his own life. A pathetic end to a deranged reign. You would think this would be the end of Sporus's nightmare, but his cruel fate was only just beginning. He was immediately claimed by Nymphidius Sabinus, the commander of the Praetorian Guard, who had helped overthrow Nero. Did Nymphidius want to inherit Nero's power, his madness, by possessing his living trophy? When Nymphidius was killed, Sporus was passed to the next emperor, Otho, who had been one of Nero's old friends. Otho too kept Sporus by his side, calling him Poppaea. He was no longer a person, he was a political heirloom, a living memento of a fallen tyrant, passed from one ruler to the next. But the ultimate humiliation was yet to come, at the hands of a man with a purpose far crueler than obsession. The next emperor, Vitellius, had no romantic delusions about Sporus. He saw him purely as a tool for a public spectacle. To humiliate the memory of Nero, Vitellius planned to force Sporus to perform in the gladiator arena. His role? To publicly reenact the myth of a goddess being raped. It was a final depraved act designed to parade Nero's decadence before the Roman people, using Sporus's body as the stage. Faced with this ultimate public degradation, Sporus saw only one way out. He took his own life. This was not an act of surrender. For the first time in years, it was an act of choice. It was the only agency he had left. In death, he finally reclaimed the identity that had been stolen from him. This was his final act of rebellion, choosing freedom in death over continued life as another man's living doll. For centuries, historians have told the story of Sporus as a bizarre footnote, a symbol of Nero's insanity. But his story is so much more than that. It's the profound tragedy of a human being who was systematically abused, erased, and dehumanized. It's a story about the fight to find yourself when the entire world is trying to turn you into someone else. In a way, Sporus was a mirror. Just as his body was mutilated, so too were the core values of Rome, its honor, its dignity, castrated by the absolute power of one man. This story forces us to ask timeless questions. What are the dangers of unchecked power? What is the line between love and obsession? And what is the true worth of a person's identity? It makes you wonder, are there modern versions of Sporus today? People whose identities are being erased by forces beyond their control, in ways we don't always see? If the story of absolute power and the madness of Roman emperors captivates you, don't miss our videos on Caligula, the man who allegedly tried to make his horse a consul, or Commodus, the gladiator emperor who brought a golden age to a bloody end. Or explore our playlist, The Darkest Secrets of History, to uncover more stories that have been buried by time. The story of Sporus is more than just a dark page in a history book. It's a warning about the fragile line between love and obsession, power and destruction. What do you think about his tragic fate? Who do you think was truly the most to blame for this tragedy? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We genuinely want to hear your perspective. If you found value and fascination in this story, please hit the like button and share it, so more people can learn about the forgotten tragedy of Sporus. And be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, so you don't miss our next exploration into the hidden secrets of the past.